Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining our third in a series of 4 Lunch and Learn sessions during the 2023 League of Women Voters of Arizona Legislative Week. We are so delighted you're joining us. We hope we will have a full house as we are going to hear from some powerful folks who are doing all that's good for us in democracy. My name is Penny Sharan. I'm the League of Women Voters of Arizona State President and the State Advocacy Vice Chair. On this, for this event, we are very fortunate to have, of course, our esteemed Advocacy Chair, Gitel Sear, who is going to be helping us navigate through the questions and through the conversation. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan, all-volunteer member organization. We've been around since 1981. Contrary to some of the interesting questioning at committees, the League, through its members and generous donors, but we do all our work as all volunteers. What's very important is we stay rooted in our nonpartisanship, which means that we neither support nor oppose any candidates. We stand firm in our positions, regardless of which legislature or which party happens to agree with us. Okay, we are always happy when both parties are aligned with our thinking. It's not we align with the parties. It's the parties need to align with us. So I want us all as League members to stand firm in that and push back on any efforts to craft us as describe us as anything other than nonpartisan. And you might wonder, why is Penny saying this? Because we are in a tremendously adversarial environment in the legislature, and the desire to promulgate extreme partisanship is not just in the legislation, but it's in the simplest of behaviors that normally would be a civil conversation to becoming a conversation that is steeped in partisan rhetoric. Having said that, today our intention is to provide you all an inside view of what goes on as our legislators, who may or may not align with what we are doing in testifying, are certainly here to share with us what they see and what the landscape is in front of us. We are a premier voting rights organization, and our focus always as a top priority is voting rights. Every year, the state board votes on top priorities, and guess what? Number 1 is voting rights. So today's discussion is rooted in that context. For our legislature on this call, and for others who are joining us, we may actually have some students from the Arizona Students Association on this call. So we're very grateful for the ASA Association for promoting these Lunch and Learn series. I'm going to go ahead and give you an overview of what we had anticipated as the legislators who would be presenting, but they're also doing very important work at the Capitol in committees this morning. Senator Sundaresan was scheduled to be here with us at noon. Unfortunately, she is still in a very contentious committee hearing of the Senate Government Committee. And her administrative assistant called back and said they still have 3 bills to be heard and will join us if she can as those bills move forward. This is their life, and it's important for us to understand that during these weeks, we all need to extend grace when we invite them to our meetings, that we elected them to do the work at the Capitol. Senator Juan Mendez is also supposed to join us, but we anticipate he has the same issue in terms of being in a committee hearing. We are, however, very, very fortunate to have Representative Carrick. Representative Carrick is a freshman, and we'll hear from her again in our Legislative Lobby Day. So we are very grateful to you, Representative Carrick, for giving us this time, and we're so looking forward to hearing from you. We always want to hear from our warrior up there at the Capitol, our lobbyists, and we have several, but right now it seems leading the charge is our professional lobbyist, Jody, and we're going to call on her to talk about what that climate is, what it feels like, what she is observing as what's going on in the Senate from the perspective of speaking to the committee versus Laura actually serving on the committee, Representative Carrick serving on the committee. Today's discussion is going to be moderated by myself and Gitel. And so with that, I just want to do a very quick heads up for everybody. Please mute your microphones. We need you to post your questions in the chat to the host. So post it either to me or to Gitel, and we're both monitoring and we'll make sure we bring that up. If we have unanswered questions, because we do record them, post your questions regardless of whether we have time to answer it or not. We'll try to get answers from the speakers post-event. You can also write to us at LWVAZadvocacy@gmail.com. We are recording today's session, and all of these sessions will be available next week on our YouTube channel, and we will be publicizing through our newsletter. With that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that we can start with an introduction of Representative Carrick. Gitel is going to introduce our representative and also pose some starting questions for you. Gitel, take it.
Okay, I hope everybody can hear me. So, Representative Chair, thank you for being here. I have a brief bio of yours that I will share with the group. Laura Carrick represents LD4 and serves on the House Municipal Oversight and Elections Committee, which is the key one for us right now, and the Education Committee, which is also critical for league work. She's lived in Arizona nearly all her life and is a proud product of the Arizona Public Schools, both U of A and ASU. She earned a master's degree in education. She taught kindergarten and second grade in the Title I school district. And her years have in the classroom have showed her just how critical cuts to education can be for the kids and the families. She's a former president of the Phoenix chapter of the National Organization for Women, and she's a community organizer and advocacy consultant serving as a community outreach coordinator for the nonpartisan group Civic Engagement Beyond Voting. Thank you again, Laura, for being here. And we thought we'd start off with a couple of questions that that really focus on our concerns with what is happening at the legislature, especially in the voting rights area. So, given the tsunami of what I guess we could call voter unfriendly bills, what do you see as a strategy to help us defeat those bills? And what can we do as a league and as individuals to make a difference? Very open-ended question.
Well, goodness, thank you. First of all, I'm so pleased to be here and on this panel. I have great reverence and respect for the league and the work that you do. So thank you. What I would say is that people are inundated with news about what's coming out of the Arizona State Legislature and news about our elections and things like that, that it can sometimes feel like drinking out of a fire hose. I think one of the most important things you can do as league members is to talk with people that who may not be paying attention or may have just checked out because of what an inundation it is with all these bills. and really letting them know kind of what's being proposed and how significant some of these changes are that are being floated. Some of the bills that we're seeing would essentially end mail-in voting in Arizona. They would require all 7 million of Arizona's ballots to be counted by hand. And, that's one that if you're able to talk through a little bit more, I mean, all of these, when you really talk through what these would look like in practice, I think people have a different, gives them a little bit more insight into how massive of a change this would be. So for that bill in particular, the hand count bill, they're saying we couldn't use machines to even tally these votes. And so, we think about in Arizona, we have roughly 70 choices on our ballots. That's 150 million ovals statewide, 300 million if we're checking our work and counting it twice, which of course we want to do. And we can't use any machines to do that. So that begs the question, how are these actually counted? These 150 million things that we're counting individually. Is this a giant whiteboard? Are these papers that we're logging it onto? Are we using an Excel spreadsheet? Does that count as a machine? Do we need to break out the abacus? I mean, and when you can talk through really how these things look, I think it gives people a different perspective on just how extreme some of these laws are and how out of step they are with what the average Arizonan wants out of their experience with voting.
So as an average citizen, how do we gain that knowledge? Enough knowledge so that we can share it with like-minded people, because we do a lot of that analysis, and I use the we as in a very royal way of these bills to parse out the implications, and when it says this, what does it actually mean in real life? But your average, even no matter what level of education, unless you're devoting a lot of time to this, how do we help our league members and the public sort of parse out the critical pieces without going into long, treatises that nobody's going to read?
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the things, part of my professional work is with civic engagement beyond voting, and something we do is kind of exactly that. We look at things that are moving throughout the chamber, and we kind of, identify if you have 10 minutes, do this. If you have 20 minutes, here's how you can get engaged. If you have an hour, here's, how you might get engaged. And there are definitely other organizations. I know the League puts out, I believe, some information on bills. You can seek those out. Organizations or groups that you align with and that you trust and that are approaching this from a nonpartisan view. We'll put that information out on their social media or maybe a newsletter, things like that. And then if you do want to get more involved, I really encourage anyone to either watch our committee hearings online. They're available the next day in an archived video. So if you want to, pause and speed up and slow down, you can do that too. Or you can come and watch in person at the Capitol, which is a different experience, and it's very fascinating to get involved with that process. So whether you have a little time or a lot, there are many ways to engage in the political process.
I'd just like to clarify something. Representative Carrick, you're invited here as the legislator and not because of your professional work, wherever that might be. I just want to be very clear, because as the League, we are careful about promoting any other organization during our event. So I want to clarify that for our members. Okay. Representative Carrick, I want to come back to your point about the hand count and the serious impact that would have. What is the balancing of their desire for the hand count with, one, the integrity of that hand count, two, the time it takes against their desire to have results announced sometimes on the day of election? How is that? How are you all pushing back on that imbalance there?
Well, I think that's a great question. And to highlight that imbalance, that there are a lot of things, we can count elections, quickly, we can count them accurately, and we can count them cheaply. Can we do all of those all at once? No. And for me, I think that, the time and a lot of these bills are in conflict with one another, because hand counting all of these ballots would take an extraordinary amount of time, an almost unworkable amount of time, especially if we're looking at that turnaround between the primary and the general. And yet there's also this big push for faster results to get them night of. So that's been just an interesting thing to watch these bills come through, that many of them seem to be at odds with one another. And I think just identifying that and thinking about, well, how can we actually do this in a way that's safe and thoughtful and that increases confidence in our elections without sacrificing integrity and accuracy, because that we owe that to our voters.
I'm going to ask another question, and I got a question in the chat that was right along the same lines, and that is, how can we, not we, but how do you improve the climate in the legislature? Because right now the climate is, shall we say, fraught. And one of our attendees asked the question about whether or not, as part of your orientation as a new legislator, is there any focus at all on, I guess, what you call sort of professionalism and focusing on the issues? Does that come under the rubric of your indoctrination when you become a new legislator?
Well, we certainly have rules of decorum that are meant to guide our interactions down here, certainly in committee and on the floor. But in general, I mean, my approach to this has been very much to invite those conversations with colleagues from across the aisle. And I work very diligently to have those conversations and to make sure that everyone here knows that my door is open, and I want to hear perspective. I mean, I believe with many of these issues, there's a workable path forward. We just need to have the political motivation to do it and the willingness to sit down in a room and really share concerns and perspective. Because I think at the end of the day, we all want the same thing. We all want elections that people have confidence in, that are transparent. We know we have safe and secure elections. We want to highlight that message. I mean, there's a lot of common ground here. And so I think for my individual part, I work very hard to have good relationships with my colleagues across the aisle and to try and understand where they're coming from to find that viable path forward for everyone. It isn't always easy, but we keep at it.
Gital, we need to do a check to make sure that Senator Mendez has not joined us under a different name. If Senator Mendez has joined us, could you please unmute and speak up so we can spotlight you?
I didn't see him. I have been checking.
But he may come in under one of his admin's name.
Okay, well, I know his admin's name.
I'll take it to the next conversation, which is I'll loop in Jody at this time to speak about a couple of different things. Gital, if you don't mind calling his assistant to see where he might be in the process. Jody, can you speak to us about two things? You know, your experience from last year, what we did, and as a league, and the way the committees behave to what you have now recently experienced. If you could be quite specific so our members start seeing how this landscape is changing in the way we as a league have to step up in this very fraught.
Now I'm off mute.
Yes.
You can hear me now. Okay. Yeah, so interesting. And I'll just, for the benefit of the people on the call, just really briefly give you like the postage stamp bio so you know kind of where I'm coming from. So when I got out of law school, I wanted always to work at the Arizona legislature, and that was what I did. My first job was a research analyst for the Republican majority in the House, and I worked on welfare reform. I went on to work for a Republican governor. In between, I had some for-profit, nonprofit assignments. I ran the Foundation for Women, a couple of other things, and then worked for two Democratic mayors. So I've worked for policymakers in both parties, and it is a different world that we live in now than the one I came up in. It makes me a little sad. There's less civility. There is less cooperation. I do think there are many, many more ideas, and there are many, many more people civilians, citizens participating in the process. So it's some things are better, some things are worse. Now, last session, the league engages as it likes to do with its, highly researched positions, and we deliver testimony. We try and pick and choose and not, waste everybody's time talking about every single thing. Our efforts are targeted, but our positions are well researched, and I think we usually provide some information that is useful to members. And, we might have had some questions, but of course that's normal. That's the purpose of committees, is for people to understand. I do notice an abrupt shift. There were tensions, in light of the Trump era and the audit. But this session, post-election, you've got some new folks who ran on very specific issues, these issues, right? Electoral stuff, and they have a point of view about that. Many freshmen also have no experience governing or engaging with the public, in this very ritualized way that we do at the Capitol. So I notice, for instance, some committee chairmen like to conduct or have their vice chairs conduct the committee like a hostile deposition, where, they're trying to extract information, but if you're on the receiving end of it, I'm paid to do that. I have a very thick skin, but everyday people coming down here, you need to realize, you're going to have to be a little tough now. I'm not sure that that's good. And the other thing that I notice is far fewer substantive and, genuine questions with a question mark at the end of it, not just an excuse to make a statement kind of questions. And then also questions about everything except the bill which is in front of you. Like, well, who are you and who's your organization? And some of that's quite natural and, totally appropriate questions. When it gets several layers down, you start to understand, okay, we're having a conversation, but it's not about this bill. It's about bigger issues. And I wish we could get away from that and stick to issues. Very different environment nowadays.
So Jody, to pull that thread a little bit, are you seeing that legislators who, and this is across the board, not just the committee in which Representative Carrick is, are you seeing where we have newer members maybe who are still trying to feel their way to push back on deviating from the bills, or are you seeing that the committee members who want to hear from both sides are, really holding their own in pushing for that?
I think it's an extremely difficult job being in the minority, particularly on these issues, right? Members are probably sitting there, hearing things that implicated their own races and their own victories. So this is an incredibly difficult time. I'm trying to be even-handed here, but we have a majority that is operating on the basis of mythology, that there are massive problems with our election systems. Can they be better? Certainly, they can always be better. But one group of people is operating under an assumption, I think, that, or it's their stated assumption that there was massive fraud and there's just massive problems all over our election infrastructure. And they're there to continue that narrative. I want to be careful, not to attribute bad motives. I think you can be so passionate about something, right, that you lose track of it and it's just all about the cause, especially if you're a freshman legislator. And I'm obviously not speaking to the freshmen on this call who know what they're doing, right, but who they're passionate, they ran for office because they're passionate about this, they believe it in their heart. And that's one species. I think there's also some cynical political stuff going on. That's beyond our control. And of course, as the league, you know, we want to be up here, kind of above it all and just saying, this makes sense for voters. This is good public policy. But yeah, Penny, to answer your question, I mean, I think there are some members who have an agenda and they are absolutely hostile to anyone who wants to even question what they're doing. And I think that's sad because that our process is supposed to allow for that.
So I'm going to flip that question to the representative, and this, and then we're going to come back, Jody, to Wendy Rogers' behavior, because our league members and voters are disgusted with that. But I want to come back to the agenda setting of committees so that our members understand. These are the questions that we'd like to get some understanding of. The setting of agenda for the committees, it may differ from the Senate and the House, but you can certainly speak to the House. The second is, how are you being prepped prior to the committee? Okay, who does that prepping? And the third, which is equally important, is decides how many members will be on the committee of the two parties, especially when the majority is not a supermajority. So Laura, I know that's three questions, all one after the other, but you're a lawyer, so you can deal with that, right?
I'm not a lawyer, I'm a teacher, Penny. So
Oh, sorry, you're a teacher. You can definitely deal with that.
well, let's start with the agenda setting. It varies per committee. Ideally, in my perfect world, no matter who's in the party in power, you have the ranking member of the minority party and the ranking member of the majority party sitting down together and talking about which bills do we want to have more discussion on, which bills, you know, are make sense that we can move, that we know will have good bipartisan support. And it just really varies by committee chair. Right now, I know that, you know, if we're included as a member of the minority party, if we're included in these meetings, it's more of sort of an observational role rather than a collaborative role. So that's been a disappointment. We really haven't seen many bills come through from the minority party this year. I believe there have been 4 on the House side. And I know I can speak to education, which is not necessarily this committee, but we've seen Democratic bills every other year for the last 5 years make it onto education agendas. We haven't seen that in the education committee this year. So I don't have those stats for municipal oversight and elections. That would be fascinating to look into. As far as how we are prepped, we have, you know, the committee members meet ahead of time and we go through all of the bills with our policy staff. So that we can really dive into it and get some of our questions answered and look at, you know, one of the things that we look at in those briefings is the request to speak system. So if you are a user of the request to speak system, thank you. Your comments are very, very valuable. And we really do look through those to give us more insight into where people are and what some of their specific concerns or support may be on a particular issue. And then let's see, what was the third question there? I've forgotten it already.
How did they decide how many members from each of the parties will be? Because we were doing an analysis and we noticed if they only have a one vote majority, the committees are stacked 5-3 in many cases. Okay, so we'd like to understand, and where is the public opportunity to challenge that kind of representation on the committees?
I mean, the avenue for the public, I would say, is reach out to your representatives, reach out to, you know, the speaker to make your thoughts known. Yeah, the majority party, they get to set all of the rules for committees. So they choose, you know, how many are going to be on each side. And, you know, in my committees, it's a little bit more even. I know sometimes on the Senate side, we see like the 5-3s, and it just really depends on the committee. But yeah, I would wish for more conversation and more, to Jody's point about just really robust policy discussions. I love to discuss policy and I wish we had more of that. And I wish it was more of a collaborative process.
So the the members, one of the questions we're being, our members are asking is, do the legislators across the board understand that the voters are disgusted by their behaviors? People are watching these committee hearings, and do you believe that it's sustainable, this sort of extreme misbehavior?
I'll tell you, it really upsets me on a very deep personal level, because my work in my professional life, my entire life has been about teaching and inclusion and civic engagement and making your voices heard. And I don't care what party you are, if you're affiliated or non-affiliated, any citizen in any voter in Arizona has the right to come down to the legislature and engage with their government in a way that is not hostile, in a way that they don't leave in tears. I've seen that happen multiple times. And, it's very, very, very upsetting. And, we had a elections committee, and at the end of it, our chairman looked out into the audience and thanked everyone who was there for being there and called them patriots. I agree with that. When you engage with your government at this level, when you care enough to come down and attend these committee hearings or even speak, that's true engagement. That's something to be celebrated. It means that we have it's a good, healthy sign of democracy. And that's something that should really be celebrated, not this combative nature that we've seen lately is very disappointing.
One of the questions, and Jody, maybe you can take it first, and then Laura can weigh in, because the MOE committee that you serve on, Laura, is that correct, Representative Carrick? I want to make sure I get these right. I mean, I think we are following close to 250 bills across a wide range of areas, and so it takes us time to remember everything. Is the decision, let me answer a very simple question that was asked, which is, how often does Jody testify? Well, it's not just Jody who testifies. We have a team of volunteer lobbyists, and the decision to testify depends on the bill. So it's not like she goes every day and testifies. It's really, what bills do we plan on testifying? So I wanted to get that answer to one of the league members. Wendy Rogers and her behavior, but I understand there was similar kinds of misbehavior in the Appropriations Committee. The second point is the Mr. Representative Colladon's use of the Municipal Oversight and Election Committee to conduct sort of a trial lawyering, approach to conversing with the patriots who are testifying, which includes all of us league members here. Do you want to take the Wendy Rogers, because that's not the House side, Jody?
Sure. Well, what is happening, I'll just back up and provide just a little bit of backdrop. I mean, it's a hostile environment. Right? That's, people are arguing about stuff that they feel very strongly about. So there's kind of a baseline, level of hostility there if you're speaking against some of these majority elections bills. So what that's devolved to, though, the majority has brought in some folks to present on elections who are clearly interest groups, of election deniers. They're new, they are like absolutely political electoral organizations. And I think some members, rightfully so, had questions about, okay, who are you and where does your money come from? That can touch off majority members who say, okay, well, League of Women Voters, who are you? Where do you get your money? Where do you, that line of kind of interrogation, questioning. And I realize not everybody in the universe knows the League of Women Voters. That's okay. But we're kind of a brand, and there is absolutely nothing in our history that would, tell you that we were running a really extreme agenda right now with the bills that we support or oppose. Also, the tension is so high that just normal rhetorical devices, for instance, I said during committee meeting, our members are telling us that they're concerned, right? I mean, that's a way of speaking. It's literally true. Do I have the list of members? Do I know what districts they're from? Can I explain why Chairman Rogers has never heard this concern ever in her entire candidacy or life in Northern Arizona, and yet our league members have this concern about tribal and rural areas? That kind of thing, where there's nothing I can say, right, that is actually an answer, because those aren't really questions. I think the league is working with members like Laura Carrick and others who want to keep the conversation civil and productive and not waste everybody's time. I really hope that our majority can come around to the point of view that it's not a good look for them. It's not a good look for us. It's wasting everybody's time. It's okay to take testimony that you don't agree with and say, thank you, next. I mean, that could be okay. And I'd like to get back to that.
Things to come back to the question about how often we give testimony in front of committees. Very important to understand that we only give testimony when the committees are in hearing. So if you can RTS, then we are able to give testimony. Once the committee does its do pass vote, and hopefully it does a lot more held votes and it doesn't come back as zombie bills, we do not we don't have an opportunity to testify. That's when league members and the public need to step up and do intensive letter writing to their legislators and the governor to ensure that there is no effort to rubber stamp bills that are really harmful to our voters. Okay, so I wanted to be sure everybody understood that about when we testify as often as is important for us to do and when we have the opportunity. So that's how we make that decision. The second thing that I want to kind of bring back is that Jody, we met with myself and actually Marianne, who's on this call, who's the League of Women Voters of Northern Arizona president. We scheduled a meeting with the leadership of with the Senate minority leadership, who you will be hearing from on Legislative Day, and the House minority leadership, to really express our deep concerns about the climate and environment in these committees and the need for civility and balance. And we've been reassured that the leadership is going to be working hard to try to push back on that. So let's talk about the Municipal Oversight and Elections Committee. Excuse me. Gatel?
Yeah, I just wanted to, two things. I spoke with Senator Mendez's assistant, and he sends his apologies. He's up to his eyeballs in that committee hearing, so he won't be able to join us. Just wanted to let you know that. And Jody, one of the questions that we got through the chat was how, talking about the way the committees are reporting themselves, how can we get the media to pay attention to this so it is more broadly understood by the constituents that this is how their taxpayer money is being spent?
Yeah, well, that's the right question. And I think we've made some good starts. As the viewers might know, all of this effort just continues, the league's ever more sophisticated activity in this area, right? So I came on board a few years ago. We just continue to grow and get more sophisticated in these areas. Media is one of them. So we got in the habit last session of having the volunteer lobbyists would have our written testimony with us. If there were reporters in the room or in the hallway, making sure that we got that in their hands right away and, give them a little lowdown if they have time. We've continued that. So there has been coverage. You've seen both Penny and myself quoted. I think we've talked about this, it's op-ed time. I think there needs to be a major one on behalf of the league. And then we could talk about more local news outlets and maybe what league members or just interested folks could do. Because I do think this is something outside of our little weird bubble in the Capitol. Oh my gosh, everyday people totally agree that we should just be sensible and talk to each other, not waste time, do the things that we can agree on, put the other stuff to the side for a while, because there are a lot of things we can agree on and there are a lot of things we can do, but not if you're playing a political game. And so I think there needs to be pressure from the public, absolutely. And what do politicians understand? That's their stock in trade, public opinion. So we have to, it's our job to move it so that they feel, not nasty, mean pressure, but just firm, solid, hey, cut it out pressure.
I spoke extensively about what she went through and what our next steps will be. And we will be launching a series of statements and op-eds about this behavior. So stay tuned, everybody. Watch the media. And then if we get press or not, start using our press releases to send out to your local news and say, why didn't you cover this? Okay, and it's very important. So I don't want to get too far ahead of us on our strategy there, because we still, have to manage that as the league, since we speak with one voice. So we'll come back to that, but I'm glad you flagged it. And we do want to let our members know, no, we're not going to sit on our hands. We're fighting this as we continue to fight. Our litigation on the ballot box intimidation is still in progress. Let's all understand very clearly. Okay, so we are resolute in really fighting this behavior, but this continued assault. So we'll move on, because I just wanted to be sure Laura had the time. She has to leave us, or should have left us at 12:45. So I want to make sure that Laura can speak about the Municipal Oversight and Elections Committee. Laura, you're on before you run away to your
I have
next.
a few more minutes, so we're okay. But I would actually like to put a close maybe by highlighting something that we've been talking about, which is the importance of coming down to testify at the legislature. Is it a pleasant environment to do that right now? Maybe not. Although some committees, some bills, it's fine. It's totally fine. I want to emphasize that. And on the ones that it's not, on the issues that it's not, this is the people's house. You have every right to come and make your voice heard. This is not a courtroom. The folks sitting on the dais, we are just folks, and we need to hear from you. And if you feel at any point, if you're giving testimony as an average everyday Arizonan, and you feel, harassed or that you're being interrogated in any way, you absolutely have the right to say, I came here to highlight my commitment to this issue, or I came here to urge you to oppose this issue. Thank you for your time. Goodbye, and walk away. That is totally within your right. And we need to hear from you. We need your voices down here. They matter so much to myself, to my colleagues on both sides of the aisle. Please don't let that environment stop you from being here. We're up there ready to support you and hear these issues and give them the real talk that they deserve. And that's what I think committees should be. That's the time to kick the tires on a bill and really talk about, what is this going to look like in practice? What are the far-reaching implications of this? And can we be very thoughtful about how we're doing that and have real discussions that don't devolve into political theater, because that gets exhausting, I think, for everyone. So that's my hope, and that's what I try to bring to that committee, is a real focus on policy. And like I said before, we will just keep at it. hope springs eternal. I'm an optimist. I believe that.
Well, keep that optimism, Representative Carrick, and hopefully you can, as they like to call it, weaponize your optimism to fight back against these, not just against the bills itself, but against a democratic environment in which the public can be heard. You know, that is so important for us. Please stay on if you can. We're going to wrap it up here pretty shortly. So a couple of things. Thank you so much for the work you do and for joining us on this call. To all the members on the call, we sincerely apologize, but we ask you to offer grace to our legislators who are stuck in a committee hearing, probably putting up with the same adversarial input from their colleagues that we are facing as we give testimony. Gittal, it's about 12:48. Are you seeing more questions?
I am now unmuted. No, I am not.
Okay. Do you want to sort of give an overview, or should I give an overview? If you can just, tell me on what it is we're following.
If you want to do that, that's fine. You are the expert on our voting rights bills in this crap. Well,
Okay, all right, happy to do that. Okay. At today's presentation, before we all leave, we want to kind of share with you all. Can you all see my screen? Jody, can you all see it? Okay, all right. Okay. Campbell, in these Zoom meetings where our presenters have so much pull and tug, so we really appreciate everyone's patience. Here are the big voting rights and elections trends that we're seeing. One is making it harder to vote by mail, removing voting by mail as an option, vote by mail restricted to the Friday by election. So that's another bill that is worrisome to us. It basically says you can drop off your ballots up until Friday, but if you drop it off after Friday, there are two versions of it. One is a warning to say your ballot may delay the counting of the vote. The second one is basically to say no dropping off of mail ballots after the last day to drop off is the Friday before elections. We do know that a significant number of voters, especially from the Republican Party, drop off their ballots on the day of the election. So we don't understand. So clearly, these bills might be based on the premise that they might hurt the other party, but they hurt the very constituents that elected many of the legislatures to the office. The other area that, of course, we have stood against is the removal of permanent in the permanent early voting list. But what we have currently is a law that says if you miss 2 general elections in actually using your mail ballot, you will be removed from that list. Now what we have is a proposal to reduce it down to 1 election, 1 general election, which could significantly impact the independents who are on who use the mail ballots. Okay. The other area, the other broad category is perpetuating election denial, and this is under the guise of rebuilding voter confidence in elections and result. So we are asking the question of these legislators, and you also should. That confidence in election and the results was promulgated by the big lie, which are the very people who are bringing up some of these bills. And I think we mean to make sure that we do that. Denying the right. So how does this work? Denying the right of privacy to voters by making ballot images available prior to certification. We don't like the idea of ballot images being available at all, but the Secretary of State has very clearly clarified that It's actually legal to make the ballot images. What is not clear is whether that can be made available prior to the certification of elections. Making available publicly, and all of us should be paying attention to this, precinct and voting registration information, which now can be purchased in electronic form. And once you purchase this information, you can actually publish it in the internet. Okay, that used to be a prohibition where you could acquire the data, but you were not permitted to post it on the internet. So, we have deep, deep concerns about how that would lead to violation of privacy, efforts to intimidate voters. How do we know that they don't change the ballot images and then claim there was fraud or claim the results are not accurate? So, there are deep concerns on the efforts there. Again, continuing this whole, election denial under the guise of rebuilding voter confidence, we have another series. We are also concerned about all the bills that that do the following. They're going to require county websites to make available for public review voter registration and precinct lists, allow challenges to any ballot by any individual requiring costly response for the adjudicating of such a challenge, and allowing for delay of certification of results based on the challenge. The legislatures can appoint electors, thwart the will of the people, remove the power of the Secretary of State to manage the elections procedure manual. In fact, this particular bill basically is an introduction of a new section into the Arizona State revised statute that would say that ASRS 16-52, which is where the authority to manage elections procedure manual is given to the Secretary of State, would redefine the term Secretary of State to mean Legislative Council. Well, it might seem rather innocuous. Just think about the fact that bills can be introduced to change the meaning of an actual constitutionally mandated office. So will they be changing what governor means in our Arizona state statutes? We also look at changing the date for reporting results to be election day prior to certification. So these are some, this is a broad swath of the kinds of legislation we are following. There are many more, and we are at, did we look last at maybe 150 bills just in the elections and voting rights area? Okay. And keep in mind, we're following bills in education, in reproductive rights, in criminal justice, climate. So the League is doing a great deal of work on this front. So with that, I'll stop sharing my screen. We are at 12:56. Do you see any last minute questions, Gita? I want to thank Jody, who now needs to put on her combat boots and protective gear to be able to testify at the MOE committee this afternoon. Exactly. So thank you, Jody, for the work you do. And any of the other volunteer lobbyists who are on this call, the League could not have the kind of strong presence it does. And one last word about League presence in giving testimony. We are partners in large coalition of many progressive groups who are worried about voting rights. What we want you all to be aware is that we stand firm that the League must have a presence at all times at the legislature. So if you're wondering how often we testify, etc., we testify a lot because our goal is to get on the public record the League analysis and position on these, on legislation, both the ones we support and the ones we don't support. So on these last words, which is we give testimony in person, we submit in writing. So when we send you 15 bills to RTS, trust us, we are also providing testimony on many of those bills, not always in person. What's very critical to understand that getting on that public record is very important for us as we move forward. If we believe that we have a governor who's going to veto these bills anyway, so we don't need to act. You all need to not be complacent with that concept. No one can predict how a governor has to operate. We all need to continue to give individual testimony. You heard it with Representative Carrick. And more importantly, our voices need to be loud and plentiful so that the governor has the cover to make decisions that represent the will of the people. So with that, we want to thank you all for spending your wonderful this afternoon. I hope you all had a wonderful lunch, and we'll see you either tomorrow if you have registered, and it's too late to register. So if you don't see you tomorrow, we'll see you on Friday. Thank you everybody for joining the League in the Lunch and Learn series. Bye-bye.